Scott, thank you so much for coming on to Startup Steroid. I'm super excited to talk to you. I've attended a bunch of your events. I've seen you in the ecosystem for the last, 2, 3+ years, I think now, and wanted to do this interview for some time. So I'm super excited that we finally got to connect.
Yes, me too. Thanks for having me,
You're,
Noel.
thank you. You're a successful author, entrepreneur. Obviously, you've run companies and exited successfully, and now an angel investor. So we're going to get into all of those things through the interview. But tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, just introduce yourself so we have some context.
Sure. Well, I'm Scott Fox. These days I'm mostly an angel investor in early stage startups. I spend a lot of time nurturing early stage entrepreneurs and founders. And my backstory, I'm based in Orange County, California. I run the Orange County Startup Council, among other things, which is a community service group dedicated to helping early stage founders. We're really committed to increasing access to innovation and investment capital for people who are not already insiders. And that comes out of my personal background. I grew up in inner city Detroit and put myself through college and had various successful careers as an investment banker in the entertainment industry, and then as a .com guy. And I've been doing that for 25 years now. I've written, as you mentioned, a bunch of books about it. They're in many languages all over the world. And these days I mostly, like I said, I work with founders to try to help more people get access to, this revolution that's going on, that's creating both opportunities financially, but also in terms of making the world a better place. And that's what I like to do. So that's what I do.
Absolutely.
That's how we met.
Yeah, exactly. Making the world a better place is always sort of the grand vision behind what we do and what most of the businesses that we work with do. So let's start out by talking about the council, because I think that's a really worthwhile thing that you do, and then you're essentially volunteering your time for. Tell us a little bit more about what the mission is for the OC Startup Council.
Sure. Well, Orange County, California is an affluent place, and I moved here after my careers in New York City, the Bay Area, London, and Los Angeles. And I was just surprised, given the amount of affluence and education here, how little startup success there was. But then as I looked a little closer, I found that there actually were quite a few startup successes. They just weren't very well known. So I got frustrated, and as a serial entrepreneur myself, I thought, well, I can do something about this, right? So I started this organization, and we built a website, and we tried to connect everybody so that people would realize there's a lot of tech startup success going on in this ecosystem, even though there's no media covering it, and even though people are fragmented from Dana Point up to Anaheim, and from Long Beach down to Aliso Viejo, we don't all see each other the way you might run into each other in bars in Manhattan or in San Francisco, right? But we could have events. So we started holding these masterminds workshops that you mentioned. Been doing those for 3 or 4 years now. And then during the pandemic, we brought them online, trying to help the early stage entrepreneurs build their networks and give more publicity and respect to the accomplishments of entrepreneurs in this Southern California area. And together those things are working. So the Orange County Startup Council, ocstartupcouncil.org is the website. It's the number one, but the only directory of all the tech startups in Orange County. We have the number one, but only blog and newsletter about Orange County tech startups, jobs board and events calendar, all those things in one place, trying to bring the community together so that people can find each other. We don't have big phone books. You can't just look up like investor anymore like you could have 20, 30 years ago. So we have lists of investors and all that. And I'm just trying to get people together in both in social situations and also working sessions, either online or off, so that they can meet each other. They can meet other founders, build the support groups and networks that they need, meet the people that they want to hire, and build relationships with investors so that they can get up to the next level. And then when they have any sort of success or progress, the Startup Council publishes the newsletters and tries to make some noise about it so that everyone feels more confident about our ability to deliver here in Orange County.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. And we'll definitely link the website and the link to sign up for the newsletter. Your newsletters are fantastic too, by the way.
Super.
So we'll definitely include the links for all of those things in the description. But before COVID in 2018, 2019, I remember we used to do these events live in person,
Yeah.
where we invited all of the entrepreneurs from our ecosystem in one place. Now you've taken that model online. Tell us a little bit about what that looks like, what the online mastermind sessions are like.
Sure. The Startup Accelerator workshops are designed to educate the entrepreneurs, but also to help them build networks, like I just talked about. So when we meet in person, as you well know, the primary content is questions that the entrepreneurs bring. In fact, it's free if you bring a question, and that's the point: is that we want people to come into a place where they can meet their peers and get questions answered that help them build their businesses, but also build the relationships by talking to each other about the issues and challenges in their businesses. So it's a win-win situation. Um, and I did that because I got tired of going to panels where only three people on stage got to talk, nobody else did. Um,
Right.
so online, it's largely the same format, but now we spice it up with people from far outside Orange County. There are quite a few attendees from Silicon Valley or Dallas or DC or London or Sydney or Singapore, and that's fun, right? Because then you get even more perspectives and build even wider networks.
Absolutely fantastic, and I love the model that if you bring a question, then it's free. And so this way, the founders are actually forced to sort of think about what they want to get out of the experience and how they can sort of contribute, but also what value they can look forward to receiving.
Right.
So
Thanks.
I love that the model, and um, uh, in person, I've attended a bunch of the events, and you sort of went through round robin style and sort of asked everybody to sort of present and ask their question and offer some service to the rest of the group. Is that basically similar
Yeah.
what we can expect online?
For sure. Yeah. I think introductions are critical, and that's why we limit the attendance. These are not 300-person events. They're usually 30 or 40, sometimes 50 people. But it's very targeted, right? So this is not 50 random people, at a bar at a happy hour, although we do that sometimes too. That's fun. But the workshops are about networking, like I've said 3 times, on networking and building relationships that lead to investment, right? So the introductions are critical, because one of the other things I don't like about so many events is that, like I said, there's 3 people on stage talking, but there also may be 100 people in the audience, and the person you needed to meet, they might have been sitting right next to you, but you didn't get a chance to talk to each other. You didn't know who they were, right? You might have been
Right.
looking for each other, right? That co-founder or that lead developer or investor that you needed. So yes, so always do introductions, and they're quick, right? It's not speech time, but as you know,
Yep.
but yeah, I think it's important. And when we're in person, I make people wear name tags too, because I hate going to events and everybody pretends like that's not a problem, but it's always a problem. Nobody can remember each other's names. I don't know why. This is one of my laws. If I was king, every event always would have name tags. That's
Absolutely.
There's probably a startup idea in there somewhere. I have to think about that.
No, I completely agree. And when you're, even at networking events, you speak to someone,
Right.
and then half hour later, you're speaking to someone else, and you're like, oh, these two people should have connected.
Yeah.
But you can't remember the first person's name, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and it's hard to make the introduction. You sort of take that out of the equation by
Right.
having small groups and having everybody be able to connect with each other. So that's
Exactly.
fantastic. Um, so what's the I already asked you the mission, but what's sort of the end goal that you're hoping to achieve with this council? Is it, obviously we want to support entrepreneurs, but
Mhm.
do you have a sort of a goal in mind that you want to support 1,000 founders in next 5 years or something to that effect?
Yeah. Nothing that concrete, but more or less, yes. My approach is really just a rising tide lifts all the boats, right? Or the other one that I always screw up: the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. I think I got it right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole is
Yeah,
greater
there
than the
you
sum of the,
go.
right. So
Perfect.
I've made my money and my career in businesses that are growing, industries that are growing, right? So I very much have a growth mindset. In fact, when I speak internationally based on my books, people are like, "You're so optimistic." Like they just aren't raised that way necessarily. That optimism, entrepreneurship, positivity is one of America's greatest strengths, right? So
Hmm.
that comes across. That's just how I am. I think we can build something bigger and better, and everybody can win. This is not a zero-sum industry. So I really try to share that approach, And so the end game is really just to get more people in the pool, right? Like everybody jump in the swimming pool, the water's fine. We need to empower more people so that more money can be made, not just for money's sake, but so that we have, more taxes can be paid, and we can, improve our infrastructure and better schools and, all the things we need.
Absolutely.
And we need to include more people in that pool, right? I mean, diversity is a strength, not a weakness. And so many people are shut out of the on-ramps. There just aren't on-ramps from so many of our communities, both, locally, nationally, and globally. Those on-ramps just aren't there. And yet they're so easy to offer if somebody just takes the time to invite people and is nice to them. This isn't rocket science. I mean, you just got to be nice and include people. And as you've seen in the workshops, I try hard to do that too. One of the things I'm proudest of, I think, is that the Masterminds workshops are probably the most diverse startup events you will see in Orange County. Not everybody looks like me, basically, right? Which is good.
Right.
And that's a goal. So yeah, the end game is simply to improve things for everybody, and I think that will lead to better things. God knows the politicians aren't doing the job, right? I think those of us who are confident enough to, believe in our own ideas and literally start companies, and vote with our feet and our wallets, are the ones who are going to make a difference. And I'm just trying to empower more of those people.
Fantastic. That really is such a core sort of strength that you have, that optimism and that willingness to sort of build communities. And that's also what makes you a fantastic investor for founders. So tell us a little bit about sort of your investing journey and how you sort of got started and what kind of companies you like to invest in, you like to support.
Sure. Well, the top line would be I mostly invest in software, and I like B2B SaaS businesses that have a lot of traction. But who doesn't, right? that's like saying, I only buy stocks that go up, right? I guess my journey, I grew up without much money and put myself through school and so forth, and I've been an entrepreneur for a long time. So I've usually been on the other side of the table, raising money for my own companies, or working in teams that are raising money for someone else's company. And I really bring the entrepreneur's point of view to the equation. And I think that's really important, because so many investors either grew up with money or have done it so long they forget what it's like to be worried about making payroll. Or the problem I see so often that I find really frustrating is maybe you don't have any friends and family who can put that first 20 or 50 grand in, right? And most investors, like I said, they've been at it so long, or they come from money or something, that they write off any founder who doesn't already have a wealthy network, and that's just not inclusive. And there are so many people who have lots to offer. It frustrates me a lot. But anyway, so I got involved investing, once I had enough money to start investing, basically. So that's been, 10 or 15 years at least, and started off small on AngelList. I think $1,000, the first company I, invested in. And I'm in enough companies I've lost track, certainly 20 plus, at various levels, larger than $1,000. And I'm an LP in 3 funds, that invest in early stage software, again, mostly. And what I look for is the things you would normally hear, which are a solid team, idea, commitment, passion, all that, blah, blah, blah. But also a new take on whatever it is they're doing, right? If I was we'll probably get to the advice section in a minute, so I guess I'll hold the advice. Yeah, I'm looking for, differentiation and opportunity.
Let's talk about the advice piece, because I think that's really what a lot of founders are craving right now. That they might have a very unique idea, a unique take, like, as you said, on the on whatever industry they are in, but they really don't know how to get started, or don't know how they can pull that team together. What kind of advice would you have for founders like that?
Yeah, well, it's a long list. It's literally I've written books, right? So that's only 3 books. Those are different editions, Japanese and Vietnamese and Russian and so forth. It's actually only 3 books. But the newest one is 2012. So that's been a while. It's Click Millionaires, the blue one. So I've been trying for a long time to help people figure out how to get on the what they used to call the information superhighway, right? I
Hmm.
really believe in this. And the advice today is a little different, right? Those books are more about like how to find a niche, and build a blog and a lifestyle business, make 50 grand a year or so, or 100 grand a year, so you can quit the job you hate, which is still a totally legitimate thing to do. But
Right.
obviously, as we were talking about before we got started, things have kind of advanced, right? A lot of people have upscaled their ambitions because there is so much capital available. If you can, do the right checklist, there's a lot of money available from institutional investors. So these days I look at bigger deals, and the advice I give is more about raising venture money, or at least angel money.
Hmm.
And there, the advice is, I hesitate to repeat what other people on your show and other people have said so many times, but the one I was going to say a minute ago that I see missed a lot is you might have all the other check boxes, passion, industry expertise, a product that's in the market the customers want and are paying for. What people miss a lot in the presentations I see is a thorough customer competition analysis, right? Like who are the
Yep.
competitors? Because it's so easy, and I'm guilty of this myself as an entrepreneur. You get so enamored of your own idea, and you've
Hmm.
spent months, years, and a lot of money, investing in it. You tend to dismiss the competition, but investors can't afford to do that. Literally, they have to look
Yep.
at the competition, and people that you might not consider competition, we still have to, because we need to diversify. We might already have an investment in this space, et cetera, et cetera. And that's even more true for VCs than it is for angels, because in an angel, I'm investing my own money. I can do what I want, and I could invest in every company in a space, perhaps. But
Hmm.
VCs are fiduciaries, right? They're managing money
Hmm.
for other people who are usually like pension funds or insurance companies. And those people are fiduciaries also, meaning there's a chain of legal obligations, and they have to really do more due diligence about your competition than you probably even want them to, so that they can be really certain what it is they're investing in. And a lot of early stage entrepreneurs miss that point because they've met somebody like me or you who's optimistic about startups and wants to give them the benefit of the doubt. The problem is the VCs don't want to give you the benefit of the doubt. They want to, and legally need to be really, really certain.
Right. Right. And
So,
actually, quite frankly, I've obviously know that about VCs, but as we sort of come down the chain, I see a lot of angel groups going through that type of process also.
oh, for sure.
Doing the due diligence, background checks, digging into the financials,
Hmm.
learning about the industry. I know you're affiliated with several groups, including Tech Coast. What's your experience like going through that due diligence process and really digging into a new startup?
Well, the startups generally know it's coming. They don't generally, if it's, depends on if they've raised money before, right? If this is a
Right.
first time, pre-seed angel investment, it's kind of like buying your first house. You're surprised at all the information the bank wants to write that mortgage, right? And it can get
Hmm.
uncomfortable.
Yep.
If they've been through it a couple times, they, obviously are a little more prepared, and literally might be more prepared because they have stuff from the previous round, right?
Hmm.
But one big tip for any entrepreneur is to think about building the data room as you go. The data room is what we call these days it's usually like a shared file on Google Drive or something, right? Or Dropbox. But put all your stuff there and have it ready, and your due diligence will go so much faster, right?
Yep.
You don't want to wait. I've seen this many times. People they present to an individual angel over lunch, or a group like Tech Coast Angels, and we do a pre-screening and a screening, and then they get the go ahead. But that's just the beginning, honestly, right? It's like the
Yep.
check comes. That's the beginning of due diligence. And a lot of times people complain about VCs, and especially about angel groups, that they take too long because, well, you didn't have the stuff ready. Like, we were ready. We said on Tuesday we can meet, and then you took 2-3 weeks to pull together the P&Ls and the product demos, or all the things that you need, and copies of all the customer contracts, the IP agreements with all your employees and contractors. If you had all this stuff ready, the timeline compresses a lot. And again, speaking as an early stage entrepreneur, an extra 2 or 3 weeks can make a real difference if you're worried about making payroll, right? So that
Hmm.
I would put that out as a challenge to all our early stage founder friends. Build that as you go. Don't wait until they ask for it.
That's such a great piece of advice where, create that deal room, get all of the documents organized from day one. And
Yeah.
as you sort of sign more contracts, bring on more customers, or even bank statements, quarterly reports, things like that. Just
Yeah,
have that in one place, easy to access or well organized, so that when the investor does come in and want that information, you can just say, oh, here it is, copy and paste, and you're off to the races, versus trying to put that together and trying to look back a year or 2 years trying to find those documents. That's going to be a pain in the butt.
totally. And
um,
better to have too much than too little, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I've seen companies that have been around for 2 years. I've seen deal rooms with 600 documents,
right.
and I love that, because I know that they're organized, they have everything together, and they're giving me full access to
Right.
what they've done in those 2 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely right. um, Let me ask you about you mentioned your books, and about how to create the basic technologies, and blogs and things of that nature, websites. What kind of advice would you give to a company today from the technology perspective? Because you do come from that background, you have a good understanding. From a technology perspective, what kind of you know things should the company have uh, to sort of start that conversation with you?
I'm not quite understanding technology for their product or for the investors or for.
No, technology meaning what kind of code base, what kind of blogs, marketing strategy, all of those different pieces. What would they need to bring that in order to sort of suffice that due diligence process for you?
For an investor's point,
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
interested investor. Um, that's interesting because, as you know, there's really two ways to do that, right? There's the outbound, and then there's the stealth approach.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
stealth makes your outward facing media presence much more limited and easy. Um,
Hmm.
so but if you're a consumer focused brand, you better have something pretty sexy looking out there already, an Instagram profile and so forth, whatever the latest tools are. Um, and you see more and more that people are picking certain channels to really be good at, right? If you're in a gaming scenario, you might have different outbound channels than a B2B enterprise company, right? So,
Yep.
Twitch versus LinkedIn or whatever, right? I think that the bottom line is, it's become clearer and clearer every year recently, is that what investors want more than anything is if you can show that customers give a shit.
Yeah.
It's all about demand, right? And the major shift since when I raised my first round, VC round in '97, I think, is that it used to be about supply, right? If you had a good idea, a good new angle or something, and you could raise money based on an idea that you would then figure out how to distribute. Because the internet was all these new pipes that were free. It was like, wow, great. But today it's the reverse. It's you need to show that customers are noticing and that they're telling their friends, and that is generating ideally revenue, or at least some kind of trackable growth that demonstrates the traction that you've got that is going to convert into money at some point soon. So however you tell that story has got to be appropriate for the business and the sector and the customer base that you have. It may or may not be public. Like I said, it might be stealth, or, if you're a B2B company targeted at some narrow industry niche, that's a different version than if you're a direct to consumer company or an app, a game app or something. But what the investors are going to want to know is all of those essentially are inputs into what's driving the growth curve for the customer adoption and therefore the revenue. Companies increasingly these days, they don't pitch based on ideas, they pitch on go to market strategy, right? So
Hmm.
if you can tell me your go to market strategy is, and you have some hockey stick graphs that look sustainable and scalable, I don't care what your blog looks like, you'll get to
Right.
that later. And especially for early stage investors, the public facing isn't as important as the traction that's been generated internally until before we met you, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a great point, where I've actually heard founders use that almost as an excuse, that we are in stealth mode, so no one knows about it, or we haven't talked to any customers yet,
Right,
or we're pre-revenue, so obviously I don't have any customers,
right,
and almost use that as an excuse in the early rounds.
yep,
And my answer always is that that's not an excuse. You need to be talking to your founders even
Yeah.
before you write sorry,
Customers.
you need to be talking to your customers even
Yeah.
before you write your first line of code.
Yes.
Uh, so let's tell me a little bit more about that that customer focus, because I think that is a very important skill that founders need to have. So let's spend a minute more on that. Um,
Sure.
what do you like to see? What kind of interaction do you like to see the founder have with their customers if it's a B2B situation?
Yeah. Well, one of the things even before that is that it's nice if the founder has domain expertise because they've worked in that
Mm,
industry, right?
yep.
That can shortcut a lot of this, right? If I go and try to start some startup in an industry I've never worked in, it's all new, right? And no investor wants to pay for your education. You're supposed to bring that to the table.
Yeah.
So that's a good start, right? And then that also generally means that they have contacts in the industry who they can contact, right, and
Hmm.
ask questions and go along and find out customer information without having to spend a bunch of money on focus groups. So yeah, I tell people all the time. Well, I used to do a lot of private coaching, right? Like talking to people on the phone and from my books, right? So people would call and want to consult with me, right? And over, I would tell them, I'm happy that you paid for an hour of my time, but I got to tell you, talking to gurus or advisors is not worth your time compared to talking to a single customer, right? Hang up
Hmm.
the phone now and go call a customer because they know I'm just talking theory, right? A customer immediately will bring it down to where the conversation needs to be, which is what solves their problem, and is it a big enough problem, and is your solution good enough that I will pay for it? That's the whole game here, folks, right? Does somebody
Yep.
like what you're doing enough to actually pay for it? And if nobody's willing to pay for it, then move on, right? Or tweak it at least, right? And
Yep.
a lot of people, and I find this, no offense to my many, many dear friends who are engineers, they get caught up with the code and the solution, or the product managers who get caught up with the feature set, right? Well, we added this, we added this, we added this. Like, stop, right? Talk to some customers and see
Yep.
if they'll pay for it, right? And or if
Exactly.
they won't, what can you change to get paid, right? And that is really the whole game these days, because like we talked about, if you don't know how you're going to market, then you don't know who your customers are. If you don't know who your customers are, you don't know who's going to pay you. And if you don't know how you're going to get paid, nobody's going to want to invest in you. This isn't
Yep.
this
Absolutely.
isn't theory for us, right?
Yep. No, that's fantastic point, and this is exactly what founders need to focus on. This is great advice. Um, so let's wrap up the interview with the final question that I always ask all of the
Uh-oh.
investors that are on.
Should I be worried?
No, it's pretty straightforward. It's really the one thing. We've talked about a bunch of different things, but one thing that the founder has to have when they first get on the phone with you, or when they first email you their pitch deck. Um, Without that one thing, that don't even bother, don't even waste your time connecting. What is that one thing for you that you'd love to have, and sort of checks that first box for you and gets you interested in the company?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me qualify. Say, I'm happy to be here. I'm not looking for any individual pitches. I run all my
Yeah.
deals through the funds that I'm involved in. So if you'd like to pitch Tech Coast Angels, we'd be happy to hear from you. but please don't start all calling me and emailing me or LinkedIn messaging me. Um,
Absolutely.
but I think the one thing is kind of what we were just talking about, some validation. There's, the popular perception of the venture market lags, like anything does, right? The media is behind the reality. Those of us who are in the industry are busy doing stuff, and it takes a while for the media to catch up and then for it to sink into the popular consciousness. The popular consciousness still seems to think that with just an idea, you can then find people who are going to invest in you. And it really just doesn't happen anymore. I'm sorry. It doesn't. There's just too many ways to build things online inexpensively. Even if you don't have rich uncles, right? Like I talked about, you can build stuff and try stuff really inexpensively. And it might not be zero free, but like $100. Okay, come on. You scrape together $100 if you think you're going to run a business, right?
Right.
Um, and what I want to hear is the good idea, yes, but also that you have some validation, and it may not yet be customer purchases, $1 million purchase orders or whatever, but that you have actually tried something. And here's my point, that you have actually taken action, and that you have a bias toward action. You're going to actually do some shit. You're
Hmm.
actually going to build stuff and not just talk, right? So you meet as an investor, you meet lots of different entrepreneurs, and I meet more than most because of my activities. And there's a couple buckets, right? You've got the engineers who want to, and I'm painting with a broad brush. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but you got people who like to build stuff, but they don't want to talk to anybody, right? And then you've got the talkers who want to talk all day and build relationships, but don't actually build anything, right? And you can't be either of those. You got to be somewhere in between, the best of both, which is you either know how to do it yourself, or you know people who you can charm into building stuff for you with limited resources. And then you're a good enough talker that you can convince some people to buy it and make some friends with investors and, do both. And that's, you can usually, as we all can, you judge people pretty quickly when you talk to them. That's what I want to see. Somebody who's going to do this, but they're not crazy in this direction or crazy in this direction. They're crazy in just the right direction. And they're actually going to do something, and they have some progress already to show for it. So that wasn't a very quick answer, but
no, but that's perfect. The concept of MVP, we sort of bat that term around, but it could be as simple as a PowerPoint deck that you can take to a customer, show them, and say, "Hey, would you buy this?" Right? And if you would, can we sign a letter of intent that basically says that 6 months from now, 3 months from now, whenever the product is ready, you'll at least consider it. And if you have that letter of intent, that is a huge thing for an investor. Or
I agree.
if it's not a PowerPoint, then maybe it's if you're a programmer, then maybe create a very simple piece of code that you can share with someone. So those are the kinds of things that even if you are pre-revenue, even if you are in stealth mode, that we would like to see, right, as investors.
Yeah, I think there's this, I often say the beta test is one of the greatest gifts that the software industry has given the world. In the old days, you had to make something perfect and then ship it, and you lost control, right? You had to, like my books, right? You had to edit them and then you print them on paper and ship them to Barnes and Nobles all over the world, right? Or any sort of physical product, right? It had to be perfect. But these days you can try stuff, right? And the beta test. So yeah, absolutely. I think you're right on there, Devala. I would rather see somebody, if you said to me, I have a new idea and I've talked to 10 different investors, I would be much less impressed than if you said, I have an idea and I've talked to 3 customers and all 3 customers said, that's interesting. Tell me more. Or ideally, like you said, that's so interesting, I will buy it as soon as it's ready, even better. Like 2 or 3 of those, or 5, you could do that this afternoon, right? I mean, seriously, if you have an idea, get on the phone or, walk into a restaurant or wherever your targets are, go stand in the parking lot of that software company you think is going to be your customer and talk to somebody, right? I mean,
absolutely.
It forces you out of your shell, but that's what investors want to hear, because it demonstrates everything we just talked about, right? I have an idea that is good. I'm willing to go talk to people and convince them of stuff. And I got positive feedback, and it shows that you have that bias toward action. I was just talking about that's everything I want to hear in one shot. So you tell me, I talked to Sequoia, I talked to Kleiner Perkins, I talked to Benchmark, I talked to all these, Tiger Global, great. Okay, but
doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I want to know what your customers think. And ideally, I'd rather keep Tiger Global out of it so that we invest at a better valuation. So.
Fantastic. And I think you nailed it when you said bias towards action, right? That's such an important thing that we want in the founders that we invest in. We want them to be able to take that action and just, that's what we want. We want you to execute. So fantastic. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave our founders? Obviously, they all should join the OC Startup Council. The links are in the description. So founders are watching, click that, get on the council and sign up for the newsletter. I think that's the number one thing. But any other final thoughts that you'd like to leave with our founders?
Well, 2, I guess. One is if we're doing promotions, the Startup Accelerator workshops are once a month. And they're a lot of fun. I'm looking around here. I got it. This is the logo you're looking for. If you see any of these, click on them and I'll be happy to come join us. It's every month. And then I started doing startup office hours on our YouTube channel as well that are free. And, if you just want to come ask questions, it's just me talking if you have a question, right? So if that's helpful, I'd be happy to help. And that's the real point, is a final piece would be find the people that want to help, right? We are out there. we can't always engage the way you want to engage, which is get emails say, would you please review my, come meet me at Starbucks and review my deck for 2 hours. No, I'm not going to do that. Sorry. But
Right.
if you find the different people that, are in your sector and are willing to help, there are people willing to help, and especially angels. That's why we do this. So I would recommend anybody to find the angel groups that are active in their industry or their region and engage, and there are resources like the Small Business Development Corporation here in
Yep.
Orange County at UCI. There's one specifically focused on tech,
Yep.
tech software companies. They work for free. There's a lot of resources, and actually they're listed at the Startup Council. So I guess that circles back. Come list, we list them all, our community partners.
Yeah, and we'll link up your YouTube channel as well, so people
Oh,
can
cool.
subscribe directly and watch that next time you're doing office hours. I think
Sure.
that's also extremely valuable for founders and being able to connect and have that conversation. So fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on today and sharing tremendous amount of value. I really appreciate you, and yeah, let's stay in touch and let's see how what else we can do together so we can continue to serve the community that we're in.
Sounds good, Naval. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.